Smash that like button right now and welcome back to the channel Vikings Nation, because today we are doing something that every single fan of this franchise needs to sit down and pay close attention to right now, because the 2026 NFL Draft is bearing down on us fast, and the decisions the Minnesota Vikings make over the next few weeks could define the trajectory of this team for the next 5 years. We are going deep into Dane Brugler's Beast Draft Guide, the most respected, most comprehensive scouting Bible in the entire draft industry, and we are breaking down every single target the Vikings should be eyeing in rounds 1, 2, and 3. 5 first-round options that range from the consensus favorite everyone keeps mocking to Minnesota all the way to the surprise home run pick that nobody is talking about enough. Then the second-round sleepers and day 3 gems that could complete a genuinely outstanding draft class. The Vikings have 9 picks in this draft. 9 selections across 7 rounds and an enormous amount of organizational capital to deploy. This is the moment where this roster gets reinforced. This is where the Kyler Murray era either gets the surrounding pieces it needs to compete, or it does not. So let's get into every detail, and if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now so you never miss a video from this channel. Let's go. Alright. Let's start with the prospect that has become so synonymous with the Vikings at pick 18 that some fans have started rolling their eyes every time his name comes up in a mock draft. Dylan Thieneman, safety out of Oregon. If you have been following mock draft coverage at all during this pre-draft cycle, you have seen this name connected to Minnesota so many times that you can practically hear the crowd groan before the analysts even finish typing. According to NFL Mock Draft Database, which tracks the full landscape of mock drafts across every major platform and publication, Thieneman has been the projected pick for the Vikings at 18 overall in approximately 60% of all first-round mock drafts. Mel Kiper has done it in both of his mock drafts this cycle. Daniel Jeremiah has done it in both of his. Field Yates did it. Bucky Brooks did it. Charles Davis summed up the entire case in 9 words. The Vikings find the perfect replacement for Harrison Smith. That is the argument in a single sentence. And here is the thing. The argument is actually really good when you look at the full picture. Thieneman is a genuinely extraordinary athlete. He ran a 4.35 40 at the combine, which is track speed for a safety. He had a 41-inch vertical leap. He broad jumped 10 feet 5 inches. His relative athletic score places him among the freakiest athletic specimens to come through the safety position in years. And the production backed it up. 306 career tackles, 8 interceptions across 3 college seasons, with his best moments coming on the biggest stages. He made the game-winning interception in overtime against Penn State last season at Oregon in one of the most pressure-packed moments any college safety could face. Dane Brugler's write-up on Thieneman landed on something that should resonate very deeply with anyone who has watched Brian Flores run a defense. Brugler compared him to Justin Reed, specifically pointing to his scheme-friendly recognition skills and his eagerness as a run defender. The word scheme-friendly in a Brugler write-up is essentially a signal to NFL coordinators that this player can do multiple things. He is not a one-dimensional free safety who plays deep zone and waits for the ball to come to him. He is a versatile, football-intelligent defender who can line up in multiple spots and still make plays at a high level. Lance Zierlein at NFL.com described him as an extension of his defensive coordinator, adjusting the secondary to motion and pre-snap shifts with the kind of awareness that most players develop over years in a professional system. In Brian Flores's defense, that is not a luxury. That is a requirement. Flores demands defensive backs who can play multiple spots, hop down into the slot, play in the box, cover tight ends, and make the right calls pre-snap to keep the entire secondary aligned correctly. The reason Thieneman fits Minnesota so precisely is that his skill set checks literally every box on that list. And the context of the safety room makes it all the more urgent. Harrison Smith, one of the greatest safeties in franchise history, is now 37 years old and facing legitimate retirement questions. Jay Ward has started just 5 games in his career. Josh Metellus is a competent starter but has not shown Smith-level impact. The safety position is an urgent organizational need, and Thieneman is the best available solution sitting right there at 18. But here is where the conversation gets genuinely interesting. Because while Thieneman may be the overwhelming consensus pick, there are other options that deserve serious consideration, And one of them in particular is the kind of selection that does not show up in 60% of mock drafts but would absolutely justify popping your jersey if he lands in Minnesota. Jordan Tyson, wide receiver out of Arizona State, has been a fascinating case study in the pre-draft process for precisely the reasons that make him simultaneously the most exciting and most nerve-wracking prospect available to the Vikings. The talent argument for Tyson is almost absurdly compelling. He is 6'2", 203 pounds, with the kind of route-running precision that draws comparisons to players at a much higher level of acclaim. Brugler said his skill set reminds him of Stefon Diggs, which is a phrase that should immediately get every Vikings fan sitting up in their chair. His releases are among the most deceptive in the class. His ability to create separation without elite track speed is the result of footwork, timing, and the kind of release package that scouts use the word disgusting to describe, meaning it is so good it is almost unfair to the defensive backs trying to cover him. Multiple analysts have described him as the player in this class most likely to develop into a legitimate number 1 receiver at the NFL level if he stays healthy. That qualification, if he stays healthy, is where the conversation gets complicated, because Tyson's injury history is genuinely alarming by any objective measure. He tore his ACL, MCL, and PCL in 2022 at Colorado, which is one of the most devastating combinations of knee injuries you can sustain in organized sports. He spent most of 2023 recovering. He had a breakout 2024 season, 75 catches, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, and then broke his collarbone in the final regular season game. Then in 2025 he dealt with a nagging hamstring injury that cost him playing time and prevented him from working out at the NFL Combine or participating in Arizona State's Pro Day. ESPN's Matt Miller reported that multiple scouts now rank him as the 4th wide receiver on their internal boards and that his stock has slipped to the back half of round 1 territory. He is scheduled to work out for teams on April 17th, 1 week before the draft, which means there is still time for that number to shift dramatically in either direction. Here is the compelling case for the Vikings to swing on Tyson at pick 18 if he is somehow still available. The wide receiver room behind Justin Jefferson has a question mark at number 3 after Jalen Nailor left for the Raiders. Jordan Addison is there. But getting Tyson alongside Jefferson and Addison would create a receiving core that opposing defensive coordinators genuinely lose sleep over. Jefferson as the number 1 demanding double teams. Addison as the precise route runner creating space in the intermediate areas. And Tyson as the big, physical, separation-creating weapon who can win on the outside, in the slot, and on deep balls with his elite catch-point ability. For Kyler Murray, whose success is going to depend heavily on having complete weapons around him in year 1 in Minnesota, that trio would be a stunning asset. The risk is real. The injury history is real. But if Tyson slips to 18 because of the medical concerns and the Vikings front office comes away from his April 17th workout feeling confident, this could be one of those picks that looks like an absolute steal when evaluated 3 years from now. Brugler's comparison to Stefon Diggs is not mild praise. That is a career trajectory projection that implies genuine star potential if the body holds up. And at 21 years old, turning 22 in August, Tyson is young enough that the accumulated injury damage from college does not necessarily predict what his NFL durability looks like. Then there is Emmanuel McNeill-Warren from Toledo, who rounds out the safety discussion at pick 18 and deserves more attention than he gets. McNeill-Warren is a fascinating prospect precisely because of the setting he comes from. Toledo is not Ohio State. It is not Oregon. It is a MAC program that operates at a level of competition well below the power programs where most first-round picks come from. But when you turn on McNeill-Warren's tape, the NFL talent is not hidden. It is obvious. He is a 6'1", 210-pound safety with closing speed that stands out even on film against inferior competition. Brugler described him as an impressive size athlete on the back end who is at his best when roaming and reading his keys, floating the ball, and quickly closing space. He has rangy tools that push for starting safety reps as an NFL rookie and is expected to be a day 1 impact player. The reason McNeill-Warren makes the first-round discussion compelling is exactly that day 1 readiness element. If you are a team like the Vikings, who are declaring themselves an all-in contender with Kyler Murray under center, you cannot afford to draft a player who needs 2 or 3 years to develop into his role. You need contributors. You need players who can walk into the building in June and be ready to start in September. McNeil Warren fits that profile. And Brugler's assessment suggests he is not a project. He is a football-ready safety who happens to have played at a smaller school, which is not the same as being a developmental prospect. If the Vikings want a safety in round 1 and Thieneman is unavailable, McNeil Warren is absolutely a credible alternative. His closing speed on tight ends and slot receivers is a genuine trait that translates to the Brian Flores defensive system, and his overall athleticism reads as legitimate even on tape against MAC-level competition. You do not need to take the opponent's word for it when the player himself is doing things on film that look unmistakably like a first-round talent operating above the level of his competition. Now let's move to the second-round targets, because the Vikings pick again at 49 overall and there are fascinating options available. C.J. Allen, the linebacker out of Georgia, is a player who has generated significant interest in draft circles and makes a ton of sense for what Flores wants to build on defense. Allen wore the green dot at Georgia last season, meaning he was the player responsible for relaying the defensive signal calls from the sideline to the huddle. Kirby Smart does not hand that responsibility to a player he does not completely trust. The green dot is for your most football-intelligent defender, your captain in the field, the player who can absorb the complexity of the game plan and execute it under pressure while also playing his assignment at a high level. C.J. Allen was that player for one of the best defensive programs in college football. Brugler noted that Allen has reliability issues in zone coverage, something that will be worked on at the NFL level, but described him as a speedy flow and scrape linebacker who is quick to trigger and be around the football, projecting as an NFL starter who can make a Nick Bolton-like impact. That Bolton comparison is instructive. Bolton has been one of the most dependable, consistently productive linebackers in the NFL over the last several seasons. Not a superstar, not a Pro Bowl name, but a player who shows up every week, makes plays in the run game, and executes his assignments with precision. For a Viking defense that needs linebackers who can fill gaps fast and get to ball carriers before they turn nothing into something, C.J. Allen at 49 is a pick with immediate and obvious value. On the offensive side of the ball, another second-round target that the draft community has noted for the Vikings is Chris Johnson out of San Diego State, a wide receiver with strong competitive instincts, solid production, and a special teams dimension that this organization has shown it genuinely values. Brugler's assessment highlighted a combination of instincts, eyes, and athletic movement skills that allow him to consistently make plays on the football, while projecting him as someone who should compete for a starting role on day one while also making an impact on special teams. Minnesota has consistently valued that kind of two-way contributor, and with the WR3 spot still technically open, Johnson as a day 2 option who contributes immediately on coverage units while developing into a bigger offensive role over time fits the organizational philosophy precisely. Moving into the third round, 2 players stand out as genuine targets that could complete what would be an outstanding draft haul. Lee Hunter, the defensive tackle out of Connecticut, represents the kind of interior defensive reinforcement that the Vikings need after releasing Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. Hunter is not a dominant pass rusher. Brugler was clear about that, noting he does not have the pass rush skill set to consistently impact the quarterback. But as an instinctive run defender with heavy hands and the ability to occupy gaps and free up space for the playmakers around him, Hunter next to Jalen Redmond could give Minnesota a legitimately disruptive interior defensive duo. Redmond has developed into one of the best players on this defense, described by multiple coaches and analysts as the team's most important defensive player in terms of overall disruption. A scheme-diverse 2-gapping nose tackle next to Redmond does not need to be a star. He needs to be reliable, physical, and smart. Hunter appears to be all 3. And then there is Jake Slaughter, the center out of Florida, who addresses what has become a clear and present organizational need for the Vikings. Brugler named Slaughter his number 1 center in the 2026 class, describing him as a player who consistently does his job using controlled movements, stout strength, and veteran processing skills, projecting him as someone who should compete for starting center reps as a rookie. The Vikings have built what could be a genuinely excellent offensive line with Donovan Jackson locked in at guard, Brian O'Neill as one of the better tackles in the league, and Christian Darrisaw working back to full health. But the center position remains the question mark. Landing Slaughter in the third round and having him compete for the starting role would give this offensive line the continuity and chemistry it needs to protect Kyler Murray and open running lanes for years to come. Continuity among offensive linemen is not a nice-to-have. It is the foundation on which everything else is built. Getting your center of the future in round 3 of the same draft where you addressed your safety needs in round 1 would be a remarkable day of organizational work. Step back and look at this draft class picture as a whole, and what you see is a roster-building exercise that has the potential to be genuinely transformational. Dylan Fienman or Emmanuel McNeil-Warren to anchor the safety position for the next decade. Jordan Tyson as the moonshot gamble at wide receiver if he is available and the medical checkouts clear. C.J. Allen adding intelligence and toughness to the linebacker core. Lee Hunter strengthening the interior defensive line next to the already excellent Redmond. Jake Slaughter completing the offensive line puzzle at center. 9 total picks across 7 rounds to fill the gaps on a roster that is otherwise genuinely competitive and built to win right now. The 2026 NFL Draft begins in Pittsburgh on April 23rd. Every mock draft, every Brugler write-up, every analyst projection is pointing Minnesota toward a genuine window of opportunity to build on the Kyler Murray signing and declare this team a legitimate contender. Now the front office has to execute. Now the picks have to land. The window is open, the talent is available, and 17 days from tonight, we find out if the Vikings walk up to that podium and make the selections that change the next 5 years of Minnesota football. Now it is your turn to call your shot. Who is your dream pick for the Vikings at number 18? Are you Team Fienman, Team McNeil-Warren, Team Jordan Tyson, or does somebody else entirely have your heart? Drop your pick in the comments right now because I want to hear every single opinion in this community. If this breakdown fired you up for draft week, smash that like button because it genuinely helps this channel reach more Vikings fans and keeps the coverage coming every single day through the draft and beyond. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now because we are going to be with you for every single pick, every trade rumor, and every dramatic moment of the 2026 NFL Draft in Pittsburgh. Skol Vikings! Let's go get it! See you in the next one. Smash that like button right now and welcome back to the channel Vikings Nation, because today we are doing something that every single fan of this franchise needs to sit down and pay close attention to right now because the 2026 NFL Draft is bearing down on us fast and the decisions the Minnesota Vikings make over the next few weeks could define the trajectory of this team for the next 5 years. We are going deep into Dane Brugler's Beast Draft Guide, the most respected, most comprehensive scouting Bible in the entire draft industry, and we are breaking down every single target the Vikings should be eyeing in rounds 1, 2, and 3.